The night came down hard over the Wyoming prairie, wind cutting like a blade and stars hanging cold and sharp, and Caleb Hart rode straight into it with a body already half broken, his horse lathered and shaking beneath him, the long trail behind soaked in blood and memory. Folk said a man knew when his time was near, and as Caleb felt the numbness spreading through his ribs and down his hands, he figured this was how it ended. Alone in the dark, miles from any lamp or prayer, he slid from the saddle when his strength gave out, boots sinking into crusted snow, breath tearing out of his chest in ragged pulls. The old line shack rose ahead like a black shape against the sky, abandoned years ago, or so he thought, and he laughed once, a dry sound, because dying men did not usually get lucky enough to find shelter. He pushed the door with his shoulder and stumbled inside, the smell of dust and old wood wrapping around him. His vision swam. The gunshot wound burned like fire under his coat, and when he dropped to his knees the floor felt warmer than the snow. Or maybe that was just the last kindness his body offered. He dragged himself to the wall and sat there, waiting, remembering the ranch he lost, the brothers buried, the woman who left when hope ran out. The wind moaned through the cracks like voices calling his name, and that was when he saw her, standing by the far wall where moonlight slipped through a broken board. A woman in a pale dress, hair dark and loose over her shoulders. Still as a memory, Caleb's heart stuttered, then slowed, because men raised on the frontier knew the stories. They knew about spirits that lingered where pain had soaked the ground. He swallowed and let his head fall back, figuring fear was a waste this late in the game. She did not move at first, only watched him, eyes catching the light, like water under ice, and when she finally stepped forward, her feet made no sound on the floor. He spoke to her then, voice rough, telling her he meant no harm, that he would be gone soon enough. She tilted her head as if listening to something deeper than his words, and the shack felt suddenly full, not of ghosts, but of breath. She knelt in front of him, close enough that he could see the faint freckles on her cheek, close enough that his pulse kicked like a young colt. He waited for the cold that folks always talked about, the chill touch of the dead, but when her fingers brushed his wrist, there was warmth, real warmth, spreading into him, and his breath caught. His eyes widened. She flinched too, like she had not expected it, like she had been afraid he would pass right through her. She whispered his name, though he had not told it, and that broke something open inside him. Ghosts did not speak like that. With worry and relief tangled together, she worked fast. Once she realized he lived, tearing cloth, pressing her hands to his side. The pain flared sharp and bright and real, grounding him in the moment. Caleb groaned and grabbed her sleeve, more from instinct than strength, and she told him to breathe, her voice low and steady like water over stone. She smelled of smoke and sage, of a life lived close to the land, not of dust and death. And as she cleaned the wound, she spoke in fragments, telling him her name was Eliza, that she had been staying in the shack through winter, that she kept to herself because people did not stay long out here anyway. He asked why she had not lit a lamp, why she had stood there like a spirit watching him die. She hesitated, then admitted she had thought he was the ghost. That riders did not come this far anymore, not since the cattle routes shifted and the land went quiet. She had seen him fall and thought she was finally losing her mind the way loneliness promised it would. They shared a thin smile over that, pain and fear softening into something almost human again. She bound his side tight, fed him water drop by drop, and when his head lolled, she slapped his cheek gently, refusing to let him slip away. The hours crawled, wind howled outside, and the small fire she coaxed to life painted the walls gold. Caleb drifted in and out, each time waking to the feel of her hand on his chest, counting his breaths, each time surprised by how solid she felt, how the simple truth of another person could pull him back from the edge. He told her pieces of his story, not all of it, just enough to explain the bullet and the running. She listened without judgment, eyes steady, and when dawn began to thin the darkness, she leaned back against the wall, exhaustion carving shadows under her eyes. Morning light revealed the shack for what it was, broken but standing, much like the two of them. Caleb watched Eliza sleep sitting upright, hair falling loose around her face, and felt something stir that he thought had died long before last night. She was not a ghost, and neither was he, not yet. Outside the prairie waited, harsh and unforgiving, but inside that fragile shelter, life had reached out and taken hold of him again. And as he closed his eyes, breathing easier now, Caleb knew that whatever came next would not be faced alone. Daylight did not bring peace the way Caleb hoped it might. Instead, it revealed consequences, the kind a man could not outride forever. Eliza woke first and stepped outside to check the land, returning with worry written plain across her face. Riders had passed sometime near dawn, tracks fresh and careless, men who believed the world still owed them obedience. Caleb knew those tracks, knew the kind of men who made them. Bounty hunters paid to drag him back, breathing or dead. His chest tightened, not from pain this time, but from fear that had nothing to do with dying. Eliza listened as he finally told her the full truth, about the ranch stolen through forged papers, the fight that followed, the gunshot meant for another man that ended up tearing through flesh and changing everything. She did not recoil, did not look at him like a criminal or a ghost. She only nodded slowly, as if weighing his words against something older than law. She packed quickly, movements practiced, revealing how long she had survived alone. Dried meat, bandages, a small pistol worn smooth by use. Caleb realized then that Eliza was not hiding from the world out of fear. She was hiding because the world had failed her first. She admitted as they rested that she had come west with her husband years back, chasing land and promises, only to bury him after a winter sickness no doctor bothered to ride out for. The town nearby had offered pity but little else, and when whispers started about a widow alone, she left, choosing silence over danger. Hearing her story bound them together in a way words could not undo. Two people shaped by loss, finding shelter in shared truth. By afternoon, the sound of horses drifted across the prairie, distant but unmistakable. Caleb tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Eliza caught him, her strength surprising, anger flaring bright in her eyes. She refused to leave him behind, refused to pretend survival meant isolation. Together they moved him to a shallow ravine behind the shack, covering tracks, masking scent, the kind of careful work that came from long observation rather than formal training. The riders arrived soon after, 3 men roughened by sun and cruelty, their voices loud, confident that the land itself belonged to them. Caleb watched from hiding, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to run or fight, yet his body betrayed him. One of the men stepped into the shack, rifle slung loose, laughing about ghosts and empty land. The sound of it sent a chill through Eliza that had nothing to do with fear. Memories surfaced of nights when laughter carried danger. When no one came to help, she steadied her breathing and waited. When the man wandered close enough, she moved, quick and silent. The pistol raised, not with hatred but with resolve. Her voice cut through the air, sharp as frost, commanding him to drop the weapon. The surprise on his face was almost comical, until the others heard and turned. Guns rising, the world narrowed to seconds. Caleb forced himself upright, pain screaming, and fired from cover. Not to kill, but to distract. Chaos erupted. Horses spooked. Shots rang out wild and useless in the end. It was the land that saved them. The ravine twisting, the brush thick, Eliza guiding Caleb through paths only someone patient would know. The bounty hunters cursed and fired until the distance swallowed sound. They did not pursue long. Men like that preferred easy prey. When silence finally settled, Caleb sagged against a boulder, breath ragged, blood seeping again. Eliza knelt beside him, hands shaking now that the danger had passed. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder, relief breaking through her composure. And in that moment Caleb understood something vital. Being alive was not just breathing, it was being seen, fought for, chosen. Night fell again as they made camp far from the shack, stars burning brighter than before. Eliza tended his wound with renewed care, anger softening into tenderness. She admitted she had thought of herself as already half gone from the world, living quietly like a shadow, but standing up to those men had awakened something fierce inside her. Caleb reached for her hand, fingers closing warm and real, and thanked her not just for saving his life, but for reminding him it was worth saving. She did not pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers with his, grounding them both. They spoke long into the night, not of ghosts or death, but of possibility, of land farther west where names mattered less, of starting small and honest. Caleb did not promise safety. He knew better than to lie, but he promised effort, loyalty, a future built slowly rather than stolen. Eliza listened, weighing his words the way she always did, and when she finally nodded, it felt like sunrise breaking inside him. He had not known how heavy loneliness was until it lifted as sleep finally claimed them. Side by side under open sky, Caleb understood the truth behind his first fear. Eliza had seemed like a ghost because she lived between worlds, unseen and untouched, and he had been little different, drifting toward an ending he no longer wanted. Her touch had not only brought him back from death, it had anchored him to life, and somewhere beyond the darkness, a harder road waited, one they would face together. Dawn rose pale and uncertain, the kind that made promises it might not keep. Caleb woke stiff and aching, but alive in a way that surprised him. Eliza was already up, packing their few things with quiet purpose. The events of the night before, hanging between them like breath in cold air. Neither spoke at first, because some truths needed time to settle. When they finally moved westward together, slow and careful, Caleb leaning on a rough walking stick Eliza had cut, he understood the road ahead would not forgive weakness. Yet for the first time in years he did not face it alone. The land stretched wide and indifferent, but her presence beside him made it feel less like an enemy and more like a test. By midday they reached a shallow creek where cottonwoods bent low, and there they rested, Caleb's strength faltering, the wound demanding attention again. Eliza cleaned it with practiced care, her hands steady despite the worry in her eyes. She confessed her fear then, not of the bounty hunters, but of hope, because hope had betrayed her once before. She told him how she had buried her husband with her own hands when the ground thawed, how the town preacher spoke of God's will while she stood alone in the wind. Caleb listened, really listened, and answered not with promises but with understanding. He told her he did not know where their path would end, only that he would not disappear on her the way the world had before, that if danger came he would face it standing. Trouble came sooner than either wished. As it always did, near evening they spotted dust on the horizon, moving fast and purposeful, not bounty hunters this time but ranchmen bearing a familiar brand burned into Caleb's memory, the same mark that once belonged to his family. Anger surged hot and reckless. Eliza felt it and gripped his arm, grounding him, reminding him that survival came before vengeance. They hid among the cottonwoods, but fate refused to stay quiet. One rider broke off, drawn by chance or instinct, and before they could retreat, he was upon them. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by contempt. Words were exchanged, sharp and bitter. Old accusations dragged into the open. The confrontation ended not in gunfire, but in something harder. Truth spoken plain, Caleb revealed the forged deeds, the betrayal that had stripped him of everything. The rider scoffed at first, then hesitated as doubt crept in, because lies cracked when faced with certainty. Eliza spoke then, her voice calm but unyielding, describing what she had seen of Caleb's character, of a man who fought to live, not to dominate. The rider backed away slowly, unsettled, promising nothing but carrying uncertainty back to his employer. It was not justice, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall that had boxed Caleb in exhaustion, forced them to make camp again, this time closer to a small settlement rumored to welcome folks who worked hard and asked little. That night the fire burned low, and Caleb admitted he feared becoming a burden, that his past would follow them like a shadow no matter how far they went. Eliza surprised him by laughing softly, saying she had lived as a ghost long enough to know shadows only had power if you let them. She touched his chest where his heart beat strong and steady, reminding him he was still here, still choosing, and that choice mattered more than any man's claim. The settlement proved rough but fair, a place of mixed souls and second chances. Caleb traded labor for rest while his body healed. Eliza found herself welcomed for her quiet strength. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, life took root. The threat of pursuit lingered, but it no longer ruled them. When word finally came that the forged deeds were under question, that men higher up were sniffing around the truth, Caleb felt a weight lift he had carried so long it had shaped him. Eliza stood with him through it all, reminding him that whatever the outcome, they had already won something greater than land one evening. As the sun dipped low and painted the prairie gold, Caleb took Eliza's hands and spoke plainly, not of marriage, or forever just yet, but of partnership, of building something honest together. She met his gaze, searching for the ghost she had once thought him to be, and finding instead a man made real through pain and perseverance. She answered with a nod and a quiet smile that said enough. The wind carried the scent of grass and new beginnings, and for the first time the future felt solid beneath their feet. Years later folks would tell the story differently, embellishing it with spirits and miracles, saying a ghost woman saved a dying outlaw on the prairie. But Caleb and Eliza knew the truth was simpler and harder. Two broken people chose life when it would have been easier to fade. Her touch did not bring him back because she was otherworldly. It brought him back because it was human. and in that truth they built a life that refused to disappear. No longer ghosts, but people who stayed.